Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Happy Friday to you. It is the 11th day of August 2023. Glad you tuned in. I do bring you some good news. We have a quiet weekend ahead. Nothing to worry about from the tropics right now. We'll take a look at why and a look into the future via the GFS to see what might be brewing out there after the weekend. And of course, the Eastern Pacific looks like it's going to remain pretty busy. Remember, we are still in the early part of August here. It's not until late August that typically things would get more busy in the Atlantic. We call that climatology, and climatology is still against the development of hurricanes. It's not until the last third of August, we'll say the 20th on, that climatology typically shifts more in favor of development. So for this weekend, nothing to worry about. So let's take a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage. I guess they got their technical issues resolved, so they're back up and running. You remember that the last couple of days it was kind of sketchy. They had to put out text products and whatnot, but it looks like they are back. Nothing over the next 48 hours or the next week in the Atlantic Basin. However, in the Eastern Pacific, you got everything going on. You got a yellow, an orange, and a red, all kinds of activity. The yellow area here, not going to develop. This one has a pretty high chance. This one, and boy, the GFS especially, pretty much all the models all over it. Luckily, no direct impacts to Mexico seen just yet, but with all this development trying to happen in the East Pac, we have to watch and see if the pattern changes to allow something to cruise closer to Mexico in the coming days and weeks. And by the way, as long as this all stays very active, you're not going to have much happening over here for various and sundry reasons. You typically don't have both basins active at the same time. It has to do with the outflow from these systems creating sinking air and shear and upper level lows that can get created. We call those heat sinks. Just a whole bevy of reasons why when this is active, usually the Western Atlantic Basin is not. Here's another reason, and this is pretty obvious. Check this out. This is from TAF B. What does that mean? Well, that's the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch, part of the National Hurricane Center. And boy, look at this animation here. Well, I stopped it. I forgot it's a GIF animation, and I can't expand it. That's okay. I'll point out what I want you to see. Right there, there's this African dust coming off. I'll show you on a different satellite animation in a moment. But yeah, this is a big outbreak, fairly far to the north overall, but with it, more dry, stable, warm mid-level air, and that's not going to allow for anything to develop in the Eastern Atlantic. This area, though, in the Eastern Pacific will stay pretty active over the next week or so. Also watching this curious little area still trying to hang out in the vicinity of the southeastern Bahamas and adjacent waters. Pressures are still fairly high overall. Don't see anything organizing. I'll show you that from one of our clues that we use to look and see. Like we play detective. We're looking to see what could develop. There are different ways to do that. Sliding the animation farther to the east. Yeah, there it is. Big old outbreak of dust. But it is farther to the north, right? There's the Canary Islands up there. This is your Cabo Verde Islands. We used to call it the Cape Verde Islands, but I guess in recent nomenclature changes, we call it the Cabo Verde Islands. And of course, these are the Azores over here. Nice geography lesson for you real quick. And then there's all that dust coming off. What an amazing product here from the GOES 16 satellite way out there in geosynchronous orbit. Pretty darn cool. Now, this is the monsoon trough sitting out here and the intertropical convergence zone. You do have some westerly wind flow coming at about 5,000 feet or so, the lower levels. That's why we call this the monsoon trough. It's kind of blowing against the overall trade wind pattern. So you can get a little bit of spin from that because you do have easterly waves that are coming off to the north, right? So you have opposing forces, and then you can get some spin. That helps a little bit. But boy, when you got all this dry, stable air and the dust injected into it, nope, you're not going to get much going on. Now, this is kind of curious right here. You can tell some of these little cloud streamers are trying to converge in here. So probably a surface trough in there where the air is trying to converge. And when you have converging air, it rises. You get showers and thunderstorms, but nothing is organizing. And we can prove that by looking at the vorticity signature. There's a little bit of vorticity down here where it's trying to come together, but not much at all, not very prevalent, and it certainly isn't very round looking. It doesn't jump out to me as being much to be concerned about, but you don't ignore it, and I certainly won't, and neither will the National Hurricane Center, of course not. But thought I'd point it out. That's about the only thing of interest out there. You can see the stretched out vorticity of the intertropical convergence zone, part of the monsoon trough out there. More of that stretched out energy. That's not going to cut it. That's not either. And this is all mid-latitude energy up in the mid and high latitudes. Meanwhile, in the East Pac, there's some energy there. This will probably head this way and try to develop. I'll show you that in a little bit on the GFS. And then there's more energy bundling in the East Pac. That area, as we've talked about already, is going to be pretty busy over the next several days plus. Meanwhile, this continues to be absolutely stunning. No way around it. It is not hype, and hype is a short version of hyperbole. No, this is absolutely wow. And you can say all you like, I've lived in Tampa Bay and it's always hot in Tampa Bay in the summer. True. This year it is hotter and the hottest. We've been measuring these things for many, many years. We know. And when we look at this right here, this is an actual sea surface temperature map. And these lines on there, those are called isotherms, lines of equal temperature. And this is all in Celsius because it is science, just the way it goes. And I'm telling you what, these numbers are ridiculous. A majority of the Gulf of Mexico, I'll outline the 31 Celsius for you right here. That is insane. It really, really is. Normally when you see a small area of 31 Celsius, a warm eddy, we call these things sometimes, just a small area maybe the size of Connecticut or something that's in the Gulf, and a hurricane goes across it. The Hurricane Center might mention it in their forecast discussion. There's a warm eddy, hurricane so-and-so is expected to cross it. That could give it a boost in intensity, whatever. The whole freaking Gulf, for the most part, is 31 Celsius, a majority of it, all right? And then you have all of this that's 32 Celsius and warmer. That just makes it even more dangerous for if we get something in there. And I know you know this, but we really need to watch this because you could get something coming in and it could very quickly organize if the atmosphere cooperates. You have to have light shear, a moist air column throughout, and it can be off to the races. This just continues to be absolutely remarkable, and it creates very high precipitable water values. So even a tropical storm moving through a heck of depression, just a tropical low could tap this and dump a tremendous amount of rainfall. Something we do need to keep in mind as we progress through August and get into September and beyond. September by itself could be very, very busy once the switch does get flipped. Not trying to be doom and gloom, just trying to tell you like I see it, and other people are seeing it as well. We can hope for the best, but you darn well better be preparing for what could be the worst case scenario with those kinds of temperatures. Meanwhile, off the mid-Atlantic and East Coast and elsewhere, fairly warm right up against the coast until you get to like Maryland, Delaware, and beyond, and then it's just a little bit too cold for my taste. This longshore current over here definitely bringing temperatures down right along the Outer Banks. Just an interesting local phenomenon. Duck Pier, Rodanthe, those areas, you can get some wild temperature. Just got to get the lips and the brain to all line up, right? The temperature swings can be very substantial there, depending on how the wind is blowing, whether you get an easterly wind that kind of pushes all that warm water back towards shore, or a southwest or westerly low-level flow that creates upwelling. Because, a little quick bathymetry lesson for you, I don't know exactly how far, but just offshore of the Outer Banks here, it's very deep. The Hatteras Canyon is out there, not like the Gulf of Mexico where you can go out from the Mississippi Sound or off of Tampa or Fort Myers or those areas where it's pretty shallow, way on out into the Gulf relative to what we have off of the eastern part of the Outer Banks there. So you get these crazy temperature swings. One day it could be in the mid to upper 80s right at the beach and in the offshore waters. The next day, 70. And you're like, what happened? Yep, I like it down here where I am in Wilmington, where it's about 82, 83 degrees in the surf. Very nice. And of course, this continues to just absolutely be the snapshot, postcard, whatever you want to call it, of 2023. Warmer, warmer, warmer everywhere. There's our El Nino. Still struggling. It's not rapidly advancing farther to the west with those really high anomalies. On Monday, we're going to take a deeper look at this and see how it's been evolving. There's some interesting things I want to point out because it's going to really start to matter, this battle between the El Nino in the Pacific and the Atlantic record temperatures. That's going to be interesting to see. And also, out of just a little bit of a curiosity kind of deal here, notice that the subtropics up here, not quite as warm as we saw last year. And I'm going to show you that also on Monday. And that is very important. Certainly the way high latitudes up here are very warm, but I don't think that helps to distort the pattern as much as it would be if this area through here looked like this. It's all about the gradient, the temperature gradient. If everything is warm, everything, then you don't have a reason to really have hurricanes, right? Hurricanes are part of an imbalance in the heat budget overall, and I think this little bit of cooling that we're seeing here, still warmer than average, but let's just wait till Monday, put it that way, and we'll go back and look at last year, and you remember how much warmth there was in the high latitudes up here, in the subtropics, and that helped to really distort things and create a very strange pattern that led to a 0 name storms August. At least that was part of the overall situation. All right, moving along to try to wrap this up here. In the Eastern Pacific, as promised, oh yeah, it's going to be pretty busy over the next several days. There's that one feature that evolves off the coast of Central America, and it really gets to ramping up quickly there. Most of the model guidance pretty bullish on this. Fairly sizable tropical cyclone as well. It's a large one in the model field from the GFS here. This is a week out, and then right at the time that the week sets up there, that's the 18th. A week from now, there's another one right where I circled the beginning of this one. Look at that. That's funny. Right on cue there. Enter one and then enter another one and so forth and so on. So we'll have to watch and see again with this pattern. If you break down the ridge enough over the southwest U.S. and over Mexico, this could sneak closer up towards the Baja. But that typically happens later towards September and beyond. Not much concern right now for our friends in Mexico, but we'll watch it and see what happens with that. All right, let's switch this over to the Atlantic Basin real quick. I tell you what, I was tempted to make a little bit of a lighthearted joke about what happens right here. Watch the GFS as I move this out just a few frames. It's like, hey, look, there's a very short-lived tropical cyclone right there. Hurricane season is going to be one day long this year, so to speak, the peak or whatever. But we don't want to joke about that. I mean, this is pretty serious stuff, but it is interesting that the GFS tries to wrap up that energy. But I think what's more interesting, and sort of a symptom, another reason why we're not getting development right now, look at this giant area. This, consider it like a big pouch of energy, will you? I will. And, you know, all that energy, all that vorticity, the heat energy, whatever, that's huge. And the GFS is trying to make sense of it. It's just math and physics. I say just, it's pretty complex, believe me. But it is. It's trying to figure it out in the modeling. And so every once in a while, it'll grab a piece of energy or vorticity, it'll close it off, and it'll say, hey, we're off to the races. And then it goes away, as you can see there, and everything just kind of gets stretched out. You got the wind flow coming this way. Just a very large, disorganized overall mess. No discernible smaller areas that can really ramp up quickly. So the wave structure, the dry air out there, and climatology, 3 strikes against anything developing in the Atlantic Basin over the next several days. And look, there's another one that comes off by about day 5, day 6 roughly. Large energy area out there. You got to have these smaller, kind of like that deal, right, to get things to really get going. And that might happen as we get towards the end of the month. We'll wait and see. That's still several days away. And you know how things can change very quickly. So pretty quick update for you. Nice weekend ahead. That's the theme. Try to have some good news in all of this bad news that we've been seeing lately with the fire in Maui and all of that and just everything else. I mean, come on, let's look at it as a positive. Use the weekend to do something to get ready for hurricane season, even if you're just thinking about it, right? I try to emphasize that as much as I can. I myself have been doing some planning just to be a little bit on the safer side. Ordered some water through Amazon to be shipped. So we already have that for the family and for any field missions. Yeah, absolutely. And just getting our equipment ready, making sure everything's ready. For me, it's a double whammy because I got to get ready for my family and I got to get ready, especially we have one up here in North Carolina, for field mission stuff. So you guys should be doing the same. Use the quiet weekend. Check the generator if you got one. Maybe you bought one last year for Ian and you didn't have to use it, or you got one for Christmas or something. Read the owner's manual. Go on YouTube. They'll tell you all about it, right? Everything's on YouTube. If it exists and it's legitimate, even if it's illegitimate, it can still be on YouTube, and you can hopefully learn something. All right, let's get this done and online for you. You guys have a good weekend. As always, thanks for tuning in and giving me a part of your day. I'll be back on Monday. I, of course, am Mark Sudduth. Thanks for watching. We'll start up again on Monday.